You're listening to an audio article by the Common Constitutionalist. Today's article is entitled, Socialism is Never Cool. Socialism never works. Look at a country like Brazil. Brazilian journalist Felipe Moura Brasil explained all about the rise and fall of his country in a segment at Pragar-U online. In the early 2000s, Brazil was a burgeoning capitalist nation. Inflation, something that plagues all socialist paradises, was drastically reduced, and the government had decided to give up on, or at least pare down, its hold over many state-run companies. They were moving toward a free market, toward capitalism. Things were looking pretty good for Brazil. In 2006, Brazil became one of the famous BRIC nations, and American and other private investors poured their investment dollars into Brazil, looking to get in on this new free market boom. BRIC was a group of 4 emerging market nations ripe for private investment. BRIC stands for Brazil, Russia, India, and China. But Brazil made one big mistake. You see, in a truly free society, while most succeed, some will be left behind. It's just the way it is and has always been. Not everyone has equal talents, nor is everyone equally industrious. Politicians love to focus on these free market inequities. They prey on the guilt of the more industrious and convince the rest that through a transfer of wealth, all can share in the bounty. Sound familiar? Are you feeling the burn? Due to this successful sales pitch, the people of Brazil elected a socialist as president. His name was Lula da Silva. He wasn't just any socialist, he was a cool socialist. You know, a cool socialist like Bernie Sanders. Lula made the younger set in Brazil feel the burn. Socialism was cool. It was all about social and economic justice, man. Lula, like Bernie, was a good salesman. He could sell socialism. Now, socialism worked for a while in Brazil. When enacted, it always works well for a while. Then reality catches up. It can take 5, 10, 15 years or more, but it always catches up. As Margaret Thatcher said, quote, "The problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money," unquote. And things went from bad to worse as Brazilians compounded their problems by electing an even more corrupt socialist, Dilma Rousseff. Now, Felipe explains how things went bad from worse as the government, to achieve social and economic justice, spent massively on government stimulus programs. He says they increased the minimum wage so that workers could have a living wage. They also increased investment in the future. This was code for massive hiring of government workers, which invariably ends up as just nepotistic hiring as well as payback for cronies. Does any of this sound familiar? It should. Brazil's rise and fall was relatively rapid. Their economy is now a disaster. Not Venezuela bad, but headed in that direction. Now, one could argue that America could never fall into this trap. After all, we right-wing wackos have been complaining about this very thing for decades, and we're still chugging along, relatively free. Well, this is both true and not. Brazil and the United States are coming to socialism from 2 very different places along the timeline. America weighed into the idea of socialism from a place much closer to pure capitalism. No big government, no entitlements, and a fraction of the bureaucracy. Not to mention the differing sizes of our economies. The U.S. is the largest economy on Earth. Brazil is much smaller. It will take our ship much longer to turn around. Progressivism in America didn't and couldn't take hold until the last of our nation's founders died off. Just like the original rise of the progressives in the U.S., socialism can't truly take hold until we constitutionalists are called from society. But as we bite the dust, we will be replaced with a generation of millennials much more amenable to socialism. Quote, according to a newly released survey conducted to assess American attitudes towards socialism, nearly half of all American millennials said They would rather live in a socialist country than a capitalist one. Some even said they would prefer to live in a communist country, unquote, writes the Blaze. And this percentage seems to grow every year. This is a sad fact, but a fact all the same. But one can't blame millennials as much as the education that was provided for them. They haven't been taught that as bad as socialism is, it invariably gives way to something far worse, communism. Socialism had always been a mere layover toward the final destination of communism, which has been responsible for snuffing out well over 100 million lives worldwide and causing misery to untold billions. However attractive these political hucksters make it sound, socialism is not now and never will be cool. Thank you for listening.